on to our next speaker is Kelly Sloan, who is the owner and principal consultant of Sloan and Associates. Kelly Sloan is a Denver-based public affairs consultant providing government relations, communications, media relations, and PAC management services at the Colorado State Legislature and in Washington, D.C. He has extensive experience in developing messaging and generating targeted communications and earned media for clients in pursuit of a variety of issues. He writes a weekly column for Colorado Politics and the Denver Gazette, has had work published in several other statewide and national publications, and is a frequent guest political commentator on local, regional, and national radio television. Today he's going to be talking with us about adding a communications plan to your political strategy could make the difference between winning and losing. Please welcome Kelly Sloan. We'll just go to 12:15. I'll move back up.
Stand by while I organize this. Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I made myself sound pretty good in it. Thank you, Patty, for the invitation and for your leadership of this organization. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to represent this industry and to have the opportunity to speak to you today. And in full recognition of the fact that I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch, I will endeavor to brevity. To paraphrase George Burns, the secret to a good speech is to have a good beginning, a good end, and to make the two as close as possible. By way of background, as mentioned, I am a public affairs consultant in Denver. I am part of the Colorado lobbying team for the pet stores, along with Amber Valdez and Jennifer Penn, who is our commander-in-chief, CEO, and head coach. I came to the government relations world a little bit unconventionally. Normally, people take political science in college, work on the Hill or at the state legislature for some legislator, go in-house and start their own firms. I came more from the journalistic side, so I bring a little bit of the public relations, communications, that kind of angle, and that's what I'd like to talk about today, hence the name of the presentation. So, since every good presentation also has to have a Venn diagram, here we are. And unlike most Venn diagrams, I think this one actually does make a lot of sense. Public relations, communications, whatever you want to call it, and it goes by the various names: political communications, advocacy communications, PR. Purists in the industry will tell you that all three of those are different. It doesn't matter. We're all talking about communications, and it's one of the three legs of the entire advocacy stool. The one being, I don't know if you can read all that, but government relations, which is the lobbying side. That's the direct advocacy with elected officials, the state agencies, federal agencies. The coalition building, which we heard about yesterday from Tom, bring people together, and then the public relations communications side. Reason I did a Venn diagram, other than the fact you have to have a Venn diagram in any good presentation, is that the three do interact like that. Your public relations communications team needs to be coordinating with the government affairs team. The government affairs team needs to be coordinating with all the other members of your coalition. And when you have the three together, it's a pretty powerful weapon. So what is advocacy communication? What are we talking about? It's any planned communication activity that intends to do or accomplish any one or combination of these things, and generally in this order. Inform, so educate people. You all know that most people out there don't understand your industry. Okay. I also do a lot of work with aviation. Nobody understands general aviation either. So a large part of this is just telling people what you do, letting people know what the issues are, what you do for a living, how you go about it, all those little things that you kind of take for granted because it's your job, you do it every day. So inform people, then persuade them that, so not only this is what we do, but that it's right, and that, that they should, they should believe in what you're doing because you do. Then engage and motivate them to actually take action. So essentially what you're looking for is a response like, okay, you're right, and I care, okay, you're right, I care, what can I do about it? And then finally, one element that a lot of people, a lot of firms tend to forget is the maintain. you do have supporters out there in the legislatures, in the public. You need to keep them, because the other side is doing this same thing as well, and they are trying to bring people over to their side. You want to not only bring more people to your side, but you want to keep the ones that are on your side with you. So you have to keep, part of the role of communications is to keep arming people with more information, more motivation, and more engagement. So the first step to putting together any type of communication plan is to do an analysis. So analysis, of course, is just what it says. You want to look at the entire big picture, what your situation is, what the opponent's situation is, what the political situation is. And the first step to that is to identify what is your objective. Okay, what do you want to do? For any piece of, whether it's a campaign, a larger campaign, or kind of a all stops fire drill, this needs to happen right now. What is the objective? Is it to stop a piece of legislation? Is it to get people to vote a certain way? Is it to counteract some really bad information that got out there? Is it damage control? What's your objective? We have any veterans here? Anybody served in the military? Okay, a couple. So you know how much we love acronyms in the military? I had to throw one in. SWAT. I borrow this from the campaign side. Every so often, I lose all sense of self-respect and reason and say yes to consulting for a political campaign. And whenever I do that, whenever I make the mistake of doing that, I'll just pull this up here. The first question I always ask a potential candidate is, okay, what are your strengths? That's an easy question to ask a political candidate, because they will go on for hours if you let them of their strengths. I'm a leader, I've done this, I can do this, women love me, men want to be me, I rescue kittens from burning buildings. They'll go on for days about just how wonderful they are, how strong they are, what they're going to do for you. And I'll sit there, oh, okay, so what are your weaknesses? Then they look at you like a Yankee lollipop out of their hand and call their mother a bad name. Because it's tough for people to identify what their weaknesses are, but it's also critical. That I tell them that is the most important question I ever ask a political candidate is, what are your weaknesses? It's also the hardest one for them. But it's not necessarily they're not necessarily bad things. Okay, now granted, for a political candidate, yes, sometimes you'll get an answer like, okay, well, if you're going to push me, I got maybe 4 DUIs, and there may be a video of me headbutting a baby out there circulating somewhere, but really what we're talking about is weaknesses, not necessarily terrible things like that. It's just, what are you weaker in? It could be, don't have a lot of funding, don't have a lot of financial resources. It could be, I'm not a great writer. It could be, I look like this. It could be a lot of things. It could just be, that I just don't have time to deal with all this that's coming down on me from the state legislature, from the federal government, from the animal rights activists, from the city, from the county. I'm trying to run a business, okay? Running a business isn't a weakness, but in terms of putting together a communications campaign, you just have to realize that and know where you need to make some things up. And the other two parts of that analysis are opportunities and threats. Now again, threats are easy. As soon as we're being attacked, we know it, we want to respond, and that's generally fairly motivating. What we don't do, I think, as much of in our industry is identify opportunities to get our message out there. And that's where I think organizations like NAIA are so critical, is in keeping our message out in the forefront and taking advantage of those opportunities when they come up. And then finally, an analysis of your audience. Who are you trying to speak to? We'll talk about that, well, actually next. So, who is your target audience? It's not a hard question, but it's one that a lot of people don't take into a lot of consideration. Think of who you're actually speaking to. But it's critical when you're drafting, whether you're drafting an op-ed or a letter or what have you. Who are you addressing it to? Who do you want to take action? Generally, in our line of work, we're talking about legislators or Congress critters or city council people. But that's going to deal a lot with timing as well. Is it them you're talking to directly, or are you trying to gain broader public support for a longer term, larger issue? So are you talking to the public, and even if your ultimate audience are the legislators, and let's face it, generally when we're at the point of needing a communication strategy, yes, we're wanting to talk to legislators. So are you talking directly to them, and then consider who are they listening to? Who are their constituents? Who are the people that will call them and they will pick up the phone? Okay, that's kind of the grass tops end of things. So that's how those are some of the considerations that have to go into your audience. And what are the characteristics of your audience? Is there a particular age group, particular culture, kind of a wage group? Are you talking to a professional class? Are you talking to the general public? Keep all those things in mind when you're trying to craft what you're going to do. Which brings us to the message. Now, if you have a message coming down to you from the Almighty on tablets, you probably don't need me. So, assuming that's not the case, let's carry on. So, messaging. When you're drafting messaging should answer these 4 questions. What is the issue? Okay, that seems fairly obvious, but it's easy for people to get off on tangents and, as we say, go off message. Young candidates do this often. So what is the issue? It should identify what the issue is, and then why should the audience care? Okay, it's one thing for me or you to go in front of somebody and make your case, say, these horrible things are happening to me, these horrible animal rights activists are doing this, and that. What do they care? You have to make it relatable to them, make something that they, and that's one strength you guys really have. It's everybody loves puppies. If they don't, that's a serious weakness they have to deal with, but everybody loves puppies. So, that's something it's easy for you to help relate to them, help make them care. What is the solution and the impact on the problem? And most importantly, what should the target audience do? Okay? You don't even necessarily have to state that, but by the time you're done an op-ed or a presentation or your comment letter, they should be feeling, okay, I need to vote this way, or I need to write my congressman, or I need to get involved, or what have you. So that's what the message should do. Stories are incredibly powerful. And again, you just heard Patty tell you that you guys have a great story, and we'll come back, I'll hammer on that. You guys have a story, you should be telling it. And do tell it. We'll come back to that in a minute. Then when you're crafting your message, just recognize that certain messages are going to engage certain people in different ways. Not every message is going to have the same impact. So find the one. Find the opening snack wrapper. All right. Next is the messenger. Who's going to deliver the message for you? And again, that's going to depend on the situation. That's where your initial analysis comes in. Who do you want? Sometimes you want this to be your messenger. All right? Other times, you want that to be your messenger. I never asked you, Bree, if I could actually use that. So is this a copyright violation? Okay. It's going to. Sometimes you want to be a little more aggressive. Sometimes you want to be a little sweeter. A lot that way. I would caution you that you're going to want to be more aggressive than you probably should be most of the time. So keep that in mind. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit too. So who's a messenger? It should be appropriate. I'm not necessarily talking about not using bad words, although that should be self-evident that you should keep it clean. By appropriate, I mean who is the appropriate messenger? Who is the person that should be saying this? And that goes to the most important part is credibility. The most important part of being a messenger, of getting a message out there, of communicating to somebody, is to ooze credibility. It's not going to make much difference if I go in front of somebody, and you're all going to hate me for this. I don't even own a dog right now. I travel too much. I'm sorry. I'm a terrible person. I get it. But it's one thing for me to go up to a legislator and talk about these issues and, in my suit and tie and all that. It's far different for Bree to do it, for Alexandria to do it, because they live, you live this. You have credibility. I have no credibility in this space. I mentioned earlier I represent aviation. I don't fly. Any of you guys know any pilots? Yeah. What do they talk about? Their planes, endlessly. Stuff I don't even know how the damn things stay up in the air. I have no credibility when I'm talking about aviation issues to a legislator, but I help them be able to tell their story and take some of the technicality out of it. So credibility is critical, and always establish that up front. Okay, whether it's in an op-ed or you're speaking to somebody or you're doing a phone call, establish your credibility right up front. Be an effective communicator. If it's a weakness, find somebody to help you do that. Okay, I'm clearly not the best speaker in the world. I'm a pretty good writer. Okay, so use your strengths. And if you have the option, for example, if you're going to testify in committee on a bill, find your best communicator. Don't find the guy with a terrible accent like me that sits down looking at his notes and says, this bill is an absolutely most horrid thing that's ever happened. No, find somebody that can actually engage and use your strengths. The other side does, we need to as well. This is another one that should be self-evident, somebody that supports your advocacy goal. Several years ago, I was working on an issue. I can't remember what it was. I think it has something to do with oil and gas or mining or something. And we were looking for op-eds to get placed out there against this particular bill. It was going to come down to a regulation or something. And we thought, well, gosh, the chamber head for such and such town, he'd obviously be great. Yeah, let's get him. So we called him up and, hey, would you do an op-ed on whatever heck this issue is? Yeah, sure, no, I'd love to. Great. Do you want us to write something? No, I'll write it myself. Even better. I don't have to do the work and it'll get placed and we're all good. 3 days later, we opened the paper and just like you see on TV, spit out my coffee. It was a screed in favor, against the industry, in favor of our bill, because nobody bothered to check if the local chamber guy was actually in favor of that industry. So make sure whoever it is, and not just supports, make sure it's somebody that's well-versed and is up to date with the messaging. For example, you can get somebody that's fully supportive, but if you haven't really briefed them, you haven't really shared, hey, here's how we're messaging this, here's what we're saying, here's the points, and then they go up and say puppy mills. Okay, that's not necessarily helpful. So finally, have somebody that's has influence with the audience, and again, that goes back to credibility. But it's also something you want to keep in mind when you're doing op-eds or something. Is again, when you're thinking about your audience and who you're talking to, it's not just your audience directly, but who influences your audience. Again, mostly we're talking about legislators. So who do they listen to? Sometimes it is chamber people, and trust me, they listen to that chamber person. It could be chamber people. It could be community leaders. A lot of times it's going to be you. It depends on what your goal is, but it all comes down to credibility and who's going to have influence with the audience, and finally exude credibility. Okay, that's what the other side does so well. Is they get people up there that put themselves out as, my gosh, I've been caring for these 15 for dogs all my life, and they just exude love and caring and credibility, and you have the Sarah McLachlan song in the background. Your eyes well up with tears, and we need to do the same thing, and we can. And there's no reason we shouldn't. All right. Next is the language. Okay, what kind of language you're going to use? Now, obviously, I'm not talking about what language. We're going to speak in English or Spanish. By language, I'm talking what's kind of more the tone. Okay, and again, there's a lot of factors go into this. Again, is it appropriate? Yes, keep it clean, but is it what is the appropriate language? Is it sometimes you do have to get a little harsher. Again, I'm very wary of saying that because our inclination is we get defensive. It's our businesses, our way of life that's under attack by these bastards. So we want to lash out. We want to get a little more aggressive. It's generally not usually the best approach. Sometimes, though, especially in a time crunch, you may want to harshen language up a little bit. Generally not. More to the point, depending on your audience, should it be highly technical or should it be more simple? Are you speaking to, if you're doing a letter to a legislative committee, you can probably get a little more technical because it's going to agriculture committee in your state. They're probably going to get some of these issues. They've probably heard this before. They're going to want a little more detail a little more in the weeds type stuff that you can provide. If it's an op-ed where you're just trying to get general public support, maybe don't go in the weeds so much. Keep it, the 10,000 foot level. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Those of you in the military will get that one too. Are we going on defensive or are we going a little more on offense? All right. So the language. And then the medium. We'll spend a little bit of time on this. By medium, I mean how are you going to get the message out there? And there's always different ways. We've got a lot of social media now. So there's different things you can get out there, different mediums that you can start using. All right. I borrowed from the political side before. I'll borrow from the marketing side a little bit. It's easy to think of media by using these marketing terms of earned media, paid media, and owned media. I should have those the other way around. Owned media are stuff you already have, so your website, a newsletter, your Facebook page, or your social media, a podcast, something that you have control of, signage, things like that. Okay, stuff that you already own that you can get out there. Paid media is obviously stuff you pay for. In the marketing world, that's paid television advertising or newspaper ads or billboards or what have you. In our world, paid and earned media, earned media is stuff that it's the media that you get that you didn't really do anything for, that you didn't have direct control of. It's mentions in news stories, it's likes and clicks and mentions in Facebook posts, those kind of thing. In our world, that gets a little murky, the line between paid and earned media. We'll go over some of the options that you have. Obviously, face-to-face. Okay, that's more the lobbying side, but speaking directly to your state senator, your congressperson, your council member, the head of the chamber when you're trying to build your coalitions. Having those direct face-to-face. That's another presentation. Op-eds, I think, are kind of the one we kind of want to focus on a little bit, and we'll talk a little more in detail about op-eds and LTEs. But op-eds are pretty powerful, not only because it's kind of that classic, mix of earned and paid media. It's something you have control of the message. It's out in the public, and then you can share it nowadays. It used to be that everybody used to get the paper. I remember when I grew up, we get a morning and an evening paper. I think you're lucky, newspaper circulation has gone way down, but everybody is online. So, once you have an op-ed published, it's not just limited to whoever gets the paper, it's whoever you share it with on Facebook or on Twitter, or email it to your group, or put it on the NAIA website or what have you, or the chamber website. So it's pretty powerful. We'll talk a little bit more about op-eds in a second. Letters to the editor. Okay, of course, that's LT is industry shorthand for letters to the editor. Those are in response generally to something either positive, usually negative, that you see in the press. They're like mini op-eds. We'll talk a little bit about them. Editorials, mentions and quotes, those are earned media. An editorial, don't discount editorial board meetings, especially if the newspaper, and if you have a fairly local issue. For example, Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs has its own paper. I'm sure Tampa does. If you have a local issue, meeting with the editorial board of local paper, if they're generally going to be on your side or that you can persuade them, can be very powerful if they can put out an editorial, and now you've got the support of local media. Again, mentions and quotes in news stories, media interviews. Tom spoke yesterday about how we want NAIA to be the go-to for people when on these issues, including the media. And I think that'd be great if anytime one of these issues comes up, one of these stories comes up, the first call on their electronic Rolodex is to one of you guys with NAIA. Okay, and that's what you should be aiming for, is that you are the resource for them. And sometimes, getting out op-eds and getting yourself out there in the media, that'll help establish that a little bit as well. Social media, again, that's an entire other conversation, but that's useful both as an owned media source and as paid media. There's options for paying for Facebook advertising and whatnot, and then traditional paid advertising. So op-eds, let's talk about those for a little bit. Just some considerations. Probably the most important is know the submission guidelines. All right. Know which paper you're going to go to, and again, that goes as part of your analysis. Who is the target? Where do we want this published? And then find out what they want for an op-ed. Word count is critical. Nothing ticks editors off more than for them to have on a website or to tell you that we take submissions of no more than 700 words, and then you give them a 925-word epistle on what you want to talk about. Then they have to either edit it down or they'll just say hell with it, not run it. Word count isn't as important for online-only publications. It used to be critical because going on broadsheet, it's not so much the word count, but it's the line count. There's only so much space on that paper. For online, obviously that doesn't matter as much. I would still keep it within that 600 to 750 word. You're going to lose people's interest after that. All right. And don't go too much below the word count either, for the same reason. If they ask for, say, a 650 word op-ed, you give them 400. Now they've got a bunch of white space they've got to deal with somehow. So word count, how to submit. In terms of the structure, I kind of made that George Burns joke about the beginning and end and a short middle. The lead and the concluding paragraph, and that's not a typo, that's industry term for the lead, how you lead into the lead is, and the conclusion are the two most important parts of your op-ed. You want to make, on op-ed, you want to make the argument, you want to make it clearly, you want to keep it on a single issue and make 2 or 3 arguments. Okay, you don't want to jump around from issues. You go from, we're talking about this bill, oh, and there's also this bill, and by the way, they're doing this over here. Keep it on one subject, and then make your argument. Make your argument up front with a strong lead, and it doesn't have to be one paragraph. I'll show you an example here in a little bit where we did the lead in 3 short opening paragraphs, and then always tie the front and the back together somehow. Okay, it's a bit of an art form to this. I'm happy to talk to people individually if you'd like to, but and then make the middle should be just framing your argument and tell your story. Okay, there's nothing that is more boring than reading an op-ed that just looks like a messaging doc that you've put into paragraphs instead of bullet form. Okay, make the argument with your story. You guys can do that because you guys have stories. Okay, you have a wonderful industry. You do wonderful things every day. Maybe you need somebody to kind of tell you how wonderful you are. What you're actually doing. Is it's God's work. But tell that. Make your argument by telling your story. Where I kind of covered who to send it to, although I will say if you can reach out to the editor directly before sending your op-ed in, unless you hire somebody to do it for a small fee, talk to the editor himself. There will usually be on most websites of papers, send it to editorials at the Smallville Herald or whatever. If you can find the actual editor and send it directly to him, that's always better, because these guys, especially larger papers, get all kinds of stuff every day, so you want to stand out a little bit. When you're sending an op-ed, always send in a headshot and a bio. Doesn't have to be professional. You don't have to go spend a bunch of money on getting a professional one. Just, have your husband, wife, friend, dog sitter, whoever, just snap a picture of you. Send it but make it look professional, make it look decent. But they all like headshots, so have one available. Put a bio that doesn't have to be your entire curricula vitae. It's just 1 or 2 sentences to help establish your credibility. I am Bree Maestas is owner of Pet City Pet Shops in Colorado Springs. Okay, establishes your credibility. Then look for the appropriate publication. And again, that goes back to your analysis of who is your audience, who you're trying to influence. If you're trying to influence the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce, there's no point putting it in the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel. Okay, if you're trying to influence, I'll go back to keep using Colorado because I know the state. If you're trying to influence a statewide issue, most of our legislators are in the Denver metro area. So it's not going to do me a whole lot of good to get an op-ed into the Burlington Herald, a little town of 5,000 out by the Kansas border, if I'm trying to influence legislators from Jefferson County, okay, it was a suburb of Denver. And then post-publication, I was saying earlier, that's the strength of an op-ed. You can get it out far and wide. Utilize your networks, utilize the resources of NAIA, and we can get that out there. Utilize friendly legislators. They want this information. That's the other part of having an op-ed is it's ammunition for the people on your side. That they can go to in committees or when it comes to a floor vote or something, or they're talking amongst their colleagues, like say, hey, look, my constituents want this, or my constituents don't want this, and it gives them arguments. So utilize everything you have, every arrow in your quiver to get it out there. All right. We'll talk about letters to the editor for a second. Make them succinct. Okay, if you want to write an op-ed, write an op-ed. If you're doing a letter to the editor, keep 250, 300 words. You're addressing one small, well, it could be a big point, but you're addressing one point. Always reference it to the best letters to the editor are ones that reference an editorial or an article or something that was in the paper. Dear editor, the editorial from last Tuesday was terrible. You're a rotten person. Here's why. Reference directly the article. You'll have a better chance of it actually getting published if you're actually referring to something that was published in that publication. And don't refer to something in another publication. My God, they hate that. My editor doesn't like me mentioning the word Denver Post. As far as the Denver Gazette's concerned, the Denver Post doesn't exist except in nightmares. Okay, so yeah, don't send in a letter to the editor referring to an article from their competitor. Again, word count and submission guidelines. Even more so than op-eds, those will be on the website somewhere, usually in the contact us page. And like I said, with op-eds, you like to work directly with the editor. LTEs, they usually have, most papers will have a submission page there where you can plug your letter into a box with your contact information. That's fine. I don't like doing that with op-eds. I like sending those directly to the editor. LTEs, that's fine. Because we're going to do, if we need letters to the editor, I always suggest doing a letter to the editor campaign. Don't just send one. So for example, there's a terrible editorial comes out, say, or an article by somebody about how terrible pet stores are, okay, or how terrible the research industry is, what have you. We need to respond to this quickly. Instead of just having one person send a letter in and rolling the dice that it'll get published, have 10, 15, 20 people, 30, okay? If you need help getting them written, we're a resource there. We can, we can work on the messaging. We can write a bunch for people to send in and sign, but bombard them with stuff, because that's what the other side does. All right, they have teams of people doing all this stuff, drafting op-eds, drafting letters to the editor, drafting comment letters, form letters. That's all they do. Okay, we don't have the luxury of having paid armies of PR people, but we do have to try and catch up as much as we can, and I'm happy to help however to the extent I'm able. Always put your contact info on letter to the editor. They're not going to publish it, but they want to make sure that it's coming from you, not somebody pretending to be you, which happens as well. All right, and then media monitoring. What I mean by that, and again, the other side does this a lot, but keep an eye on your local papers, even if you don't subscribe because you don't like their editorial slant or whatnot. Do so anyway. It's helpful, or at least have somebody in your network that's watching your local paper, regional paper if you have one, some of the TV news sites for stories, good or bad, about your industry. Okay, because if you miss something, it can get away from you. Okay, you're missing an opportunity, or you are inviting a threat. Okay. All right. And then the last element is timing and placement, which we've kind of touched on already. I'll go back just talking about op-eds. Timing is critical. Sometimes, if it's a more general issue, and periodically you want those out, just something that, kind of a very 10,000-foot view of, here's what's going on in the industry, here's what's going on in, our little part of the world. That's fine. Usually we're writing an op-ed because there's some reason for it. There's either a bill out there that's a threat, or one we're trying to pass, or there's an ordinance, or there's something going on. So you have to keep timing in mind, and that's going to depend. That's why you work with the lobbying team. So, for example, I'm working on another issue right now in front of the Colorado State Legislature. I'm working on the PR side. We're trying to time op-eds to land right before the committees. You don't want them too early. If you get it out there too early, two things will happen. First, the people that read it are going to forget about it, especially during legislative session when they have so much going on. So you want it fresh in their minds. Also, if you get it out there too early, that gives the other side the opportunity to dissect it and to respond and go back after a point by point. Here's where they're wrong. They'll lie. That's what they do. But you don't want to give them the opportunity to draft their lies and put them together. And obviously, you don't want it to be too late. I've seen op-eds be published on bills that passed or failed the day or 2 days before. It's usually for broadsheet, actual physical papers, because you get the LTE in the last minute, you think you time it right. It takes them a couple days to get to the printers, get it all laid out and everything. So there's usually a day or two lag time. Online is a little bit better. I can work with my editor at Colorado Politics, because it's all online, and say, hey, I got this op-ed. The bill's going to be in committee tomorrow morning. Can we get it in tomorrow morning? Yeah, okay. So, but generally, you can't count on that. So, and then again, placement, where it's going to be the best place for it. So, what's all this mean? How does this all work together? I mentioned, I work in Colorado with the pet stores out there, and we had an issue in Colorado Springs last fall where they had an ordinance basically to do away with Bree and Dustin's business. So, we put all this in motion. Our lobbying team, we did the government affairs side, reached out to the city council, did the meetings, did the information, got them stuff, and we also incorporated a PR campaign. And the third leg, the coalition building, we got with the chambers, we got them on board, we got some other folks on board. But here's the example of what we did on the editorial side. So we got an op-ed. I helped write it a little bit, and a very credible source. The target of all this. The Bree Mieses, owner of the pet store, has her pretty face up there instead of my ugly Irish mug. Much better marketing. And you probably can't read this, but and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'll just read the first three paragraphs, because that's kind of established the lead, and I think we did a decent job in messaging here. We wrote, Coloradans love their pets. Our state is happily one of the most pet-friendly in the nation. We know this better than most, as one of the few remaining licensed, regulated pet stores in the state. So now you're establishing credibility and kind of establishing the issue and who you are. We are not only animal lovers ourselves, but dedicate our lives to ensuring the long-term health, happiness, well-being of the puppies, kittens, and other companion animals we sell. Okay, establish your credibility right off the bat. We are also the best weapon. Patty, please don't shoot me for putting this in here, but we are also the best weapon our society has against poultry mills and unscrupulous breeders who put profits before the welfare of their animals. Okay, that put everything in their court. That was the one argument we came up with. We thought would be the most powerful is, you hate the P word. You hate puppy mills. We hate puppy mills. We are your best weapon against puppy mills. Don't put us out of business. Okay, and I can make this available. You can read the rest. But well, okay, I'll read the last paragraph too, because I'll show you how it kind of tied in. People will seek out the type of dog they need on their own with the best of intentions, but without the expertise and background needed to fully and properly evaluate the source of the animals. Driving this market underground, as prohibiting pet stores from selling puppies and kittens would do, only serves to empower and enable a type of nightmarish, spoken breeders that all of us want to see eliminated, and which an integrated and regulated pet industry with retail pet stores as a major part have helped to flush out and eradicate. Okay? And it worked. We ended up, we did have a veto in our pocket. The mayor was going to veto if it had passed. But the end result was we got that one council member that we needed, and we got that ridiculous ordinance defeated. And it wasn't just this op-ed. That's not my point. But this was part of it. I did have 2 council members and a state senator reach out to Jennifer, our lead, saying that was helpful. That really helped, set the tone, and it was really helpful. So it does work. All right, and that's my point there. So takeaways. Communications, public relations is a critical part of your advocacy efforts. Don't ignore it. Okay, it's not always a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's critical. Okay, it's the third leg of the entire public affairs stool. You have a story to tell. I've said this before. You have a story to tell. Don't be afraid to tell it. Okay, I encourage you to tell it. You should tell it. That's how you're going to win, is if you tell your story. And there's nobody better to tell your story than you. But that said, you're not alone. Okay. Again, that's what NAIA is here for. That's what, when Tom talked about coalition building, that's why we build these coalitions. So we're not going into the trenches by ourselves. Okay, you have resources, including if you're desperate, me. I'm happy to help out. There's my contact information. I think I was bright enough to bring some cards down with me. If not, they're in my room. Patty has my contact information. If you'd like some help, if you have a fire drill, be in touch. I'd be happy to help you out, because you guys do have a great story, and like I said at the beginning, it is an honor to work for and represent this industry. So thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I am standing between you and lunch, so I understand. Thanks very much. Were there any questions before we depart like fleeing lemmings? Mm.
Okay. I have a pet peeve, I guess I should say, dealing with articles that I read, even in well-known publications.
Is this where you say you found a typo in my presentation somewhere?
No,
I'm kidding.
You're great. But how do you, it's just, the headlines don't always match the body of the story. It's a clickbait, I guess.
Right.
And then the grammar and punctuation and sentence structure, it's bad. So it was just a comment to be careful when you write these things.
No, absolutely. And I mean, doing this for a living, yes, I get annoyed when people can't use your properly. The three conjugations of your. Yes, watch your grammar. I mean, I'm happy to help with that as well. In terms of headlines, that's actually an interesting point. A lot of people don't realize this. Headlines are the editor's prerogative, generally. I always put a headline, like my own column, I have a working headline that I write under. We have a new young editor that just takes them, and it's great. Before this year, my editor, I think he used 2 of my headlines just because they were especially clever. But I just put some, but that's the editor's prerogative. So always put one on there. Suggest a headline, by all means. But just, don't be shocked when it comes up with a clickbaity kind of, yeah.
Wait, hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, guys, just to emphasize on what he said, when you send something to a newspaper or a TV station or something, never ever mention that you have sent it to someone else.
Oh, yes.
Okay?
I should have mentioned
You're the
that.
first one, you're the special, you're the only one. Okay? I mean, you don't put it that way, but just neglect and omit to say, oh, I sent it to everybody.
Even better, don't send it to anybody else. Because yes, papers do like exclusivity, and I should actually put that in there. Thank you for that. Yes, when you send something in, and put that in your email to the editor, saying, would you consider running this op-ed by me? Here's who I am here on this issue. This is exclusive to the Denver Gazette or the Tampa Bay, whatever your paper's called. Here's a word count. You can, if it's time sensitive, you can put in there, if you cannot run this before Wednesday, let me know and we will send it somewhere else. But yeah, do that courtesy, and don't send it, because the worst thing that can happen is for the same op-ed to show up in 2 papers on the same day. You will never get anything published for. Okay. Well, yes, yeah. And check with their policies after it's published. Usually after a week or so, then you can send it out wherever you want to. And some smaller papers may pick it up. A lot of them won't, because again, they're all kind of jealous. So, Bree.
So I just want to comment on a few things. The op-ed writing has been huge for our campaign. The contacts that we receive after, even so, City Council was in November, so that one ran in November. I've had news contact me and say, hey, we want to tell your story. I had a gentleman come in and say, if you need any videoing or any way we can help you, we'll be more than glad to do it at a very small fee. People that I didn't even know, that we had customers respond to op-eds in very positive ways. And I think sometimes we're worried about getting out in the media or doing things like that, that the negative, or the other side is going to come out and beat us up even more. But that has not happened. And so I just wanted to point that out, that I think the op-ed writing has been huge. And like Kelly saying, making the comment, we have 9 pet stores in Colorado, and picking the pet store that is most passionate about that message has been really important. So, doing that if you specialize in, we have a pet store in Denver that specializes in working with families with special needs. And she talks a lot about that, and it's dear to her heart because she chose to go into the pet business because her child has special needs. And so when we're trying to reach a certain senator or a certain person at the state that we know is passionate about that, that's who's writing that story. So anyway, that's it.
Anything else? Oh, I think we have one more.
I'm not in a hurry, but I know everybody else is. I think you brought up a good point that I've been questioning for some time, and maybe Patty might need to speak in on this. But, I mean, I cannot get people within my dog training community to stop using the P word. And I get very, very frustrated with that. So maybe we should embrace it per se and say that's not us, or what?
May I offer a suggestion instead of using that? Personally, I use substandard breeding facilities. And you start using it over and over, like the natural ear versus the uncropped ear. It's just a matter of using it on a consistent basis so that people start recognizing that that's the proper phrase to use. So that's just what I do when in talking with the legislators, and it gives a different perspective. But you're right, our own people are the worst offenders because it's like backyard breeders.
I do want to comment a little bit. The word puppy mill is in the vocabulary. It's in our consumers' vocabulary. They know the word, or they think they know the word. Brian from Petland just made a comment. Ignoring the word puppy mill, is that putting our heads in the sand? Talking with Alexis from Allie, sorry. Allie made the comment yesterday that owning up, well, I don't know if it was Allie, but in our conversation, owning up to where we were. My great-grandfather's first pet store was in 1919. He had puppies on one side and horse meat on the other. That was his signage. So, I don't know, and I don't mean to change the narrative, Patty, but I'm just wondering if ignoring the word is putting our head in the sand and acting like it's not there. It's there, that's not us, and anyway.
I think, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead. I will just say, add one thing to that. Reason I did use that word in the op-ed was just, for that reason.
Sure.
Law of said usage, right? If it's out there, we need it for that particular campaign because that's what the other side was saying. If we didn't say that in the op-ed, then we weren't addressing the issue. Now, what I did try and do is when we use the word, is pivot it to define it as, I can't remember what I used, but substandard breeder sounds great, but Patty.
I agree with all the comments that have been made, but I think it's bad when we use it as we're talking about the industry. There are times when it's appropriate, but I like to define all the negatives in terms of conduct, not category. And unfortunately, puppy mill has been branded to everyone who's in the commercial dog breeding industry. That's the reality of it. It's like commercial dog breeding equals puppy mill in terms of the way it's been used and the way it's been branded over the years. So anytime I'm talking about, it doesn't matter whether it's in breeding or whether we're talking about pet stores, we are going to define the things we don't like in terms of the conduct we don't like. That's just what we do. Because otherwise it's kind of a form of what we have now with identity politics, right? I mean, you're allowing a brand to cover an entire industry. So I agree with the people who say you can't ignore it. I think if you put puppy mill in Google, it's going to come up, a few million times. I get that. All right. So I'm not one of those people who says under no circumstances. I think that as you used it in your op-ed piece, it was absolutely appropriate. But I do get just crazy when I'm talking among our community and they use it interchangeably because if we're going to educate the public, we're going to talk about, and also if you're going to move to leadership, and that's what you want to do, you want the public to think of you as the experts, then you have to talk about what kind of conduct you want, what kind of conduct you don't approve of. And that's just really, that's how you distinguish yourself, is really on the basis of what kinds of conduct you're looking for. So that's what I think.
Oh, one more.
Hey guys, just recently I got a hour-long, I don't know what you would call it, from a bunch of you maniacs. And bottom line was, of course, as usual, it was a whole bunch of untrue things that they were saying, and it just irritated the you-know-what out of me. But one of the things that they said, and the reason I bring this up, is they are so proud of the fact that puppy mill is part of the vernacular now, and that puppy mill, and they are trying their damnedest to get cat mill and guinea pig mill and reptile mill and all. They want all these things to be that way because of the negative connotation of puppy mill. And I think so. I agree that we don't want these mills to be further in the vernacular. But the other thing is, can we start getting into where, like somebody said a little bit ago, that's a thing of the past. Yes, it happened a long time ago. Doesn't happen anymore. We, reputable pet stores, reputable breeders, whatever, we don't do that. That is not our thing. And I think that if we can go that way, might be a little bit more positive.
The other side's running propaganda mills. Anyway, is that it? Oh, there's one more.
So the animal rights community coined that phrase. They've hijacked the word captivity and the word rescue. So when I went through media training, I'm a circus kid. I grew up with circus elephants. Talk about being in the hot seat. We don't repeat the negatives. When they say negative things, whether it's an op-ed or in person, don't repeat the negatives. Don't follow their lead. Take the offense, take your own lead. If we're responding, we're already on defense, but that's what I was told to do, and it's worked well. If they want to say the word abuse about elephants, I never repeat that word. I actually bridge over to something else that I want to make sure I say. But Monica Weldy was here yesterday with the Paradise Ranch, and she said instead of captivity, she used they're in human care or loving human care. And so we try hard to change our words because we're just following their lead. They're coining the phrases. Let's take a step ahead. Let's coin our own phrases, right? Let's go on offense. Let's figure out something we love and let's get it out there, right?
Absolutely. All right, thank you very much.
John has.
Oh, you have one more?
Let me give you just a brief moment. Yesterday I sent an email out to the rest of the pet industry, the pet community that's not here. Thank you for all that have come here, and thank you guys for accepting us as part of your community. But here's what I said in the email. Cindy said yesterday that there's a gray area, and there used to be a gray area that we didn't talk about and that I didn't sleep about. But today, I'm fine. Bring them on. Bring them on. Bring the cameras in. I don't care. So I don't worry about that gray area as much as I used to. I used to, like I said, didn't get to sleep at night worrying about the puppies and the dogs that were living, and I don't worry about that anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank Kelly for being part of the NAIA team as communications. We have Tom with legislation, and you met Andrew yesterday with our federal bill. So they're all part of the NAIA team, and we're glad they all came and spoke, and you all got to meet them and see the wonderful work that they're doing on all of our behalves. So it's lunchtime. So it's 12:20. Can we be back in 45 minutes? Okay, we'll see you back then at 1:15. Thank you. And please fill your plates up because they tend to be very generous with their portions out there. So help yourself.